Presented exclusively by Mother's Polish.
Welcome to the Slipstream podcast, where we're delivering weekly F1 content to you, the F1 fan. I'm your host, Brady, and joining me in the Slipstream tonight, we have Matt, Cole, Trickle Jr., and Austin. And for this week's episode, the boys sit down for a little Formula One Fireside Chat. But first, let's do a quick recap of episode 2.5, where we talked silly season and all about the craziness that kicked off silly season. So Cole, spill the tea and get us up to speed on what's happened in the past couple days since we last chatted, and where do we currently stand with the driver's seat carousel?
Well, it's glad to be back here. I'll try to make it as short as I can because there has been a lot happening. So quick rewind. Sebastian Vettel retires. Huge news. We all kind of saw that coming, but the next move that nobody saw coming was Aston Martin comes in and swoops up Fernando Alonso, signs him to a multi-year deal, which then in turn we all assume Oscar Piastri, Oski P, was going to slide from the reserve seat into the Alpine seat. So Alpine announces that Oski P is going to come out and be their reserve driver or be their lineup driver for next season, and he declines, more or less, says, I'm not going to drive for Alpine next year. In the background, all that's happening, Mark Webber is in talks with McLaren to try to get Oski P a seat in McLaren. That has not happened yet. So right now, McLaren's seat number 2 is wide open, and the F1 world is spinning, waiting to find out what happens next.
Well, and to clarify, there's a lot of rumors about how McLaren has already informed Danny Rick that he will not be with the team in 2023, but they're waiting until he confirms his own seat for next season, but that it will not be with McLaren. Is that true?
That's the report. Apparently, Danny Rick has reached out to multiple teams, Alfa Romeo, Haas, Alpha Tauri, Williams. He's reached out to multiple teams, so we will see where he ends up. We do not know yet. I have lots of speculation we can get into later, but DR3 is up in the air for 2023.
And one thing I wanted to circle back on more from the stats perspective. Last week we talked about sort of how Landy Norris contributes for 80% of McLaren's points so far this season, and Danny Rick's, the other 20%. And so, Matt, you've got some interesting data on sort of how that stacks up, historically for the top 5 teams. Share that with us.
Yeah. So if you look at the last 20 years, only one driver has less than a 20% share from a top 5 constructor, and that was Vitaly Petrov in 2010 with Renault. He had 27 points that year, which was a share of 16.56% of his team. But so he was the worst. Danny Rick is second worst at this point in those in the last 20 years. But with that said, Danny Rick has a less of a share of the total championship points. He only has 1.36% of those points. Petrov had 1.41% in 2010. So he is at I don't want to say all time, it's only 20 years, but kind of modern times. He's essentially, I don't want to say the worst driver, but the worst teammate from a points perspective in a top 5 constructor.
But that's halfway through the season, right? You're looking at full season right now?
Yeah, so it's halfway through the season right now. That can obviously change as we go on, and he wins a race. He wins Belgium in a couple of weeks, then it completely changes. But so far, that's where he's at compared to full seasons of the other people. And if he stays at that where he's at over the next 9 races, or he gets worse, then he's right there. I mean, it's evident of why McLaren doesn't want him in that seat anymore.
Can he turn it around? Is it like driving style? Is it car?
I think he's washed.
He's not bad. If you look at the grid, he's the 6th most winning person on the grid right now. He's got 8 wins.
In a winning car.
Valtteri.
In a winning car.
But look at what Valtteri did as opposed to what Danny Rick did in those winning car years. Rick had, 3 years? Valtteri had 4? He's 2 wins off Valtteri.
I don't know. I mean, I think if we're looking at it in a vacuum, as in like today, no, I don't think he's good at all. I mean, that's just my opinion. Is he one of the best 20 in the world? Maybe. But is he good enough to be Landy's teammate? Clearly, McLaren doesn't think so. So if you're simply judging by performance that's happened maybe in the last, 12 to 18 months with the McLaren, it doesn't seem like he's been good enough, and hence why they're ready to move on. That's not to be all, hating on Danny Rick. Everyone loves Danny Rick, especially as a personality. He's obviously a very good driver. He's won races before. It's just you've got to separate what he's done historically to what he's doing right now, and right now he's definitely underperforming.
He will lose that seat. The question is who's going to get it. We assume it's Oski P. But don't forget, McLaren has a whole list of reserve drivers who are incredibly qualified to perform for them. So I don't know. We all guess it's Oscar, but they could shake it up still.
Speaking of qualified, and Jordan and Austin, y'all may be able to point to it more than I can. Is there anybody at that age, at 21 years old, that has the qualifications that he does? I mean, Formula 2 champion, Formula 3 champion, Renault Open Wheel Championship at 21. Has anybody come into F1 or potentially coming into F1 at that early of an age with that resume?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure that there are drivers who have done it, but not that I'm aware of. He's been a hot commodity. We've all been waiting. Let's face it, Alpine has spent millions of dollars getting him ready to get into this seat for multiple years, and he's just bailed on them. So I don't know if there are other drivers who have come in as qualified as him, but he is going to be a hot commodity. We obviously hope he ends up in McLaren.
Well, it feels like the last week Alpine's been a little bit asleep at the wheel, which is highly dangerous in F1, and so they might be burned by their own inaction. And of course, we do not know the whole story, so we're making assumptions here. But for tonight's episode, we really just wanted to sit down with the boys, have a fireside chat, and talk about any and all topics F1. So we can really start here. I have a list of questions, but one that's just come to mind is we've talked Danny Rick. If you're one of these other teams, say Williams, Alfa Romeo, Alpine, do you want Danny Rick?
Yes, if I'm Williams, I would love to have Danny Rick on my team. I think Danny Rick and Alex Albon would be a great driver pairing. Do I think it's going to happen? No, but I think that Williams would love to have him. I think Haas would love to have him as well.
I think here's the argument to that, though, is you're talking about two teams that historically haven't had much money, and you've got a guy who's a 8-time winner who's going to ask for 15 million, 12 million, a good bit of money. Historically, that's really high. If you look at Williams drivers now, they're probably making $500,000 to maybe $3 million. So what is he going to bring other than prior experience that may not equate to track time right now that justifies spending that much when you can put that towards other things?
McLaren 23 money that he's owed. So he doesn't need to sign some elaborate contract with Williams. He's going to get paid from McLaren to break what he had. So even if he gets paid half of what he had, he's still in Formula One with a team that's trying to figure it out with Alex Albon.
I don't know what Williams, the Albon contract, I don't think that's been made aware of what he signed for. But this year, Albon's making $2 million and Latifi's making $1 million. So they really aren't in there just throwing out cash. But like Jordan said, if McLaren's paying him 8 or 9 to go away, and maybe there's a merch incentive or something like that, because he's going to bring money. He's going to bring money to whatever team he goes to for merchandise and other things like that they don't get from somebody else. So you would think with him signing with one of those lower teams, there is a higher chance of a bigger cash flow coming into them.
Did you say that Nicholas Latifi was making $1 million a year?
If this is correct, that's what it says. He signed for $1 million.
That's disgusting.
That's what I can see too.
Good for
he's making more than Yuki. He's making as much as Zhou.
Yeah, if I'm Williams, I guess this is just philosophically how you run a team. What is your goal? Is your goal to score points? Is your goal PR? Because Nick DeVries. I mean, do you want to give a younger guy? I guess he's 27, right? We've talked about this a little bit before. Or do you give another sort of up and comer that seat to see if he can prove to be a winner? I mean, because look, if Danny Rick goes from Red Bull to Renault to McLaren to Williams, I mean, is the next step out of F1? So why even be that bridge or have that bridge driver on your team if you know it's only going to be a year or two of these out? Why not give the person you think is up and coming the chance to prove it maybe a year earlier and get that experience? Cole, do you have any thoughts?
Logan Sargent is going to be the guy who gets the FP1 spot in Coda out here for Williams. He's an American kid. He will, I'm assuming, if Oski P takes the spot at McLaren and Herta doesn't get the spot at McLaren, I think Logan Sargent will be the first American driver in Formula One since like Scott Speed or somebody. But so I think there are plans for Williams, but I think that's maybe a couple years away, where I'm not saying that Danny Rick is going to Williams. I'm not putting that out there quite yet, but it's possible. I mean, that wouldn't hurt Williams at all if they can afford it.
Yeah, Austin, you have something to add there?
Yeah, I'm thinking like long term, kind of taking a step back. So with the new regulations in 2022, they changed salary cap, right? They changed so you can pay however much for all of your travel, your equipment, your research and development, your all of that stuff. And they also regulated time in a wind tunnel, time on a computer to engineer all of that stuff. So like now getting back on topic, like you've got Williams, which has been the worst team historically. And in those new regulations, they're given more time than everyone else to research, develop, computer, wind tunnel, all of that stuff. Every year, they're going to get a little bit more time if they're the worst team for a pretty long time. So you look at Red Bull or even Mercedes. Last year, they won the constructors. They have 80% of the maximum threshold. Williams has 120% of the threshold. So Williams is getting 50% more time in R&D as opposed to the top team 2, 3, 4, and it's only going to go up a little bit more and make those differences every year. It would be interesting to get someone who has won races, who is a little bit seasoned, to see if he can help guide the team, maybe give them some pointers on what they're doing well, what they're not. I mean, Albon has 2 years of racing before this. There's not a lot of like experience on the team behind the wheel. So it could be interesting if they brought Danny Rick in as just as straight like development. What's going to happen? And can they learn some things that he could say behind the wheel that could kind of jumpstart them into the 2024 season with all that time for development?
Yeah, we brought this up a little bit with Seb's retirement. Do we think Seb has done that for Aston Martin with Lance Stroll? I'm just going to answer that. I don't think that's happened. But anyways, all right. So to wrap up this question, we'll just go around real quick. If you're one of these other teams that may have an opportunity to get Danny Rick, are you taking him? Matt, you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a plus asset in some way. It may not just be full points, but in some combination of money, points, R&D that Austin was talking about. He's still a plus asset. It may be 0.5 or +1. It may be minimal, but he's still going to be the best driver that some of these teams could get or have had before.
Cole, what about you?
If I can afford him and I'm a small team and I don't have a backup who's ready to go like Williams, no, I would send him to Indy or to Formula E.
Sten, what about you?
Haas did 2 rookies last year, 2 rookies, and it didn't work super well. I think that you give him half a year. You commit to a year contract, you give him a leash of summer break, and if it doesn't work, you already have someone lined up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. For me, based on Matt's statistics, I was already ready to rip the Band-Aid off, but being historically bad over the last 20 years, just rip the Band-Aid off. Give me someone new. And for the record, I'm a Danny Rick fan. I'd love to see him succeed. It's just, when it's time, it's time. And I'm ready to move on for someone who's going to give me a little bit more on the track. So for the next question, I mean, we are at midseason, so I want to make sure that we talk about sort of what's happened up to this point. So I want to get everyone's best and worst moment of the season so far. And I can start. For me, I kind of have two bests, so I'm hedging a little bit. I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz's first win as a best. I know the smooth operator's been close a few times. He was second to my boy Pierre Gasly in Monza 2 years ago, and I don't know the exact number, but maybe 3 or 4 or 5 runner-up finishes, and he finally got his first win. So super happy for him. I think it's well deserved. I think he's in a winning car, and finally good to see him get that done. That his win's going to share best for me with Seb's retirement. We talked about that on a previous episode. And the worst moment for me, I think I'm going to go with Joe upside down, but not for the reason everyone thinks. Obviously, I'm glad he's okay. Crazy wreck. You don't expect this to happen. But I was really excited to see George at Silverstone in that Mercedes, and his race was ruined during that wreck too. So those are my best and worst. So let's go reverse order. Austin, let's start with you. What are your best and worst moments of the season so far?
I think the best is just the new regulations right now. Just it seems like it's a little bit more competitive, and I know that there's still 2 front-running teams, but over the last 2-3 weeks, it seems like it's now a 3-horse race. And I think it's going to be really interesting moving into the latter half of the year and see what happens and pans out. Worst moment of the year, I would say it's Seb retiring. I really do, love him on the grid. He's a character. He is very unique in kind of his role on the grid and kind of just with everyone around in the paddock. So it'll be a bummer missing him.
All right, Cole, what you got? Best and worst.
I mean, y'all have already taken what I was thinking. So I'm going to go ahead and go best gives George Russell the pole position, first pole. That was pretty exciting to see somebody new up there. And hands down worst is Seb retiring. I may come up with another one later, but my immediate thought was it's hard for me that he retires. It might be Danny Rick not getting a seat, but we'll see.
Matt, what about you?
Maybe not a best moment, but just a best like overall. I think obviously he's made this trajectory and he won the championship last year, but just Max becoming this dominant driver. I mean, we kind of already knew he was there. He won it last year. He competed with Lewis, but I think he's even better than he was last year, and it's, the car's a little bit better, but we all love dominant athletes. I mean, whether it's Michael Jordan, whether it's Jerry Rice, it's Tom Brady, those are the fun ones. Those are the ones that we talk about the most, and he's kind of transcended into this new stratosphere, in my opinion, of what kind of driver he is. He's definitely a superstar driver. He's going to win a second championship, and he's going to be the favorite next year as well. So I think that's one. And then worst, anytime Ferrari pulls out of the pit lane, basically, anytime they decide to drive. So, I mean, I think that is, it's mind-blowing just how good they can be and just how awful they are. I think that's the worst.
Yeah, and Matt, honestly, as soon as you started talking, I was like, Ferrari. Ferrari is the worst of it. We were so excited at the first couple of races of the season. I was so excited for Ferrari to be relevant in Formula One again. It's Ferrari.
And to those who don't know that just visceral feral roar. That's Charles Leclerc from Ferrari, who was in the lead temporarily, at France, and just bottled it up and sent it into the wall. Totaled his car, DNF, couldn't race, did not finish. So,
Yeah, the more we went on with best and worst, I was like, someone gonna say Ferrari? I'm surprised I didn't say Ferrari, so I'm glad we picked that up. The second question is sort of in a similar spotlight. It's really winners and losers of the first half. This could be teams or drivers. I'm gonna go. My winner is Red Bull. I think they've clearly shown coming off the drivers' championship of last year. I think even Christian talked about how they didn't even really put development into this year's car till way late because they were trying to win the drivers' championship last year. But they clearly got it right. They see, other than maybe the first race or two of the season when they had a little bit of a reliability issue. I know in Bahrain that was an issue. They've clearly got the best and most consistent car. And I think in today's Formula One in 2022, they've got the best driver in Max. They've been helped a lot by Ferrari, as we just talked about. And so they're smooth sailing. They've got to feel good about themselves. They've got to feel good about what the kind of car they put on the track and the drivers that they have. Checo's been great. He's played his role probably better than he did last year. So I think the clear winner so far of the first half is Red Bull. And for me, I'm going to go loser. I'm going to go AlphaTauri. I'm a big AlphaTauri fan. Love Pierre Gasly. They were, 6th in the constructors last year, and they're P8 right now. And they just have consistently looked like they don't have it, which is a little surprising being the sister Red Bull team. So a little disappointed in AlphaTauri. I know they had some upgrades at the Hungarian Grand Prix, and hopefully that translates to the second half of the season, and they can have a better second half of the season. But that they're my loser for so far this year. So Cole, let's start with you. Who are your winners and losers?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to make it pretty easy. My winner is Alpine. They've climbed in constructors. They've been incredibly relevant. Fernando looks great. So Esteban doesn't look bad either. And no one expected them to jump McLaren in 4th in the constructors right now. I'm also going to say that my loser is Alpine because they've gotten rid of their prized possession and Oski P. And Fernando left, we talked about it last week, last high and dry. I mean, literally found out in a press release. So I feel like Alpine is in the right spot in performance currently, but in the complete wrong spot in what they're doing. So winner and loser, Alpine.
All right, Stan, what you got?
So as a Red Bull fan, I'm actually going to say that Mercedes is a winner right now. So Mercedes came out of the gate really slow. And Toto, kudos to him for just supporting, as a manager, saying that the car isn't what it needs to be. Drivers, you keep doing your thing. We're going to get it together. But over the last couple of races, they've really come back together. And I don't know if that's Ferrari kind of taking a step back and just terrible calls, all of those things. But I heard a great comment a couple of weeks ago that was Ferrari is going to be the best team to not even get second in the Constructors' Championship. Like best car on the grid, and you're not even going to get second. So I think that Mercedes is definitely a winner because they're coming into their own at the right time. And I think the loser, specifically because he's going to lose his seat, is Goat Tiffy, Nicholas Latifi. He can't do anything. He's out of a 20 person grid, he was 21st his first year. He was behind a substitute driver. This year he's 20th. Like he's got to go.
And Matt?
So I was going to do what Jordan said and pick one team for both. But I'll digress. I will say though that if you told Ferrari at the beginning of the season, and I know they want to win, that they were going to be beating Mercedes or Red Bull at the break, that they would take it. It's just been a cluster throughout the whole season. So I think you could consider them winners and losers. But my winner would be Albon. I know he's 19th. I know he's only got 3 points. But in a Williams, he's finishing on average 12th to 13th place in the worst car on the grid. He just hasn't finished in the top 10. So I think that he has raced a lot better than the amount of points he has. So I would say him as a winner. I'd love to see him in a better car. And then the loser is Aston Martin. They just are. They're awful. I mean, from Lance to Lawrence to Seb, it's just not a good team, and they should be competing. They should be up there, in my opinion, with McLaren and Alpine battling that 4th, 5th, and 6th spot, and they're garbage. You can't. I mean, they're out in Q3 almost every single week at this point. It seems like.
Yeah, well, I think Aston Martin's going to come back from break with a pretty good morale boost with Seb retiring. But we'll move on to the next question. If you could have a beer with anyone in the paddock, who would it be and why? So, Matt, not to go right back to you, but who would you have a beer with in the paddock and why?
Well, we're going to go sodas over on this end. But
sodas are fine. Soda or beer with drink of choice.
I think I'd go with Landy. That's who I think I'm going with. I love both McLaren drivers. So I'd go with Landy. I think it'd be really cool to get kind of his insight. It seems like in some races it's either I'm either getting points or I'm gonna die on this track, and I'd like to get his mindset on things. Second would probably be Lewis. I'm not a fashion guy. I want to get some tips. I saw that all pink, the other night that he was rocking in the magazine or whatever. I'd love for him to give me some style tips if that'd be my second choice.
Yeah, we could all use those. So Cole, what about you?
Yeah. I mean, probably Fernando. I don't have a great reason why. He's been around forever. He has raced with all the greats. He's 5 points shy of being a 5-time world champion. And he's just a savage. I just love how he just wrecks shop when he leaves every team going team to team every few years.
Do you think he'd bail on the check?
No, not with that Lawrence Strolovich money. No chance. He's definitely covering the check there.
See, I think Fernando would be the guy that's on beer 3 while you're on beer 1, and you'd hear about it that you're still on number 1 while he's on number 3.
Yeah, I feel like Fernando definitely makes me puke if we go drinking together, for sure.
Austin, what about you?
Not a driver on the paddock right now, but a former driver, Kimi Räikkönen, because I've heard stories that he just used to go ham. Current driver, just to laugh the entire night, Yuki Sonoda. He already seems, if you've watched the Drive to Survive Netflix series, he already kind of is a loose cannon at the mouth, which is hysterical. But he's such a small guy too, at like 5'1" or whatever. He probably couldn't drink too much. So if he got over that tipping point, it would be an absolute shit show of a night.
Yeah, I think the Yuki's a good call. I didn't think about Yuki, but could you imagine if the beer took like 6 seconds longer to get to him than he expected, and how mad he would be? And then being all 5'2", God, that would be hilarious. For me, I'm actually gonna. I did so. For the record, I didn't say driver. I said anyone in the paddock. So for me, I'm going to go non-driver. I'm going Gunther Steiner. For those that don't know, he's the team principal at Haas. I think he would just be an absolute blast. He probably has stories upon stories upon stories, and his accent is just unbelievable. And then I would imagine after a few beers, he would get pissed and yell some obscenity at someone there, and it would just be an absolute blast to hang out with that guy for a little bit. And even maybe listen in to him having a conversation with Gene Haas about how good or bad they're doing. He's amazing on the Netflix series. He's amazing, when they have him as a guest during race weekend. So yeah, I'm going Gunther Steiner on that one. So similar, but complete opposite for the next question. If you could punch anyone in the paddock, who would it be and why? And I'm happy to start. Oh, okay. Stin wants to go. Go ahead, Stin.
Lance Stroll.
Seems like low-hanging fruit. Okay, I like it.
Just specifically because if you ever hear his interactions with his race engineer, the guy he's talking to in the car, he always complains that someone else is doing something wrong, when 9 times out of 10 it's him, and he just doesn't know race etiquette, and he has daddy's money keeping him in the seat, and I would just love to do something about it.
Matt, what do you got?
I'm going with a bunch of people on this one. I'm going with all the people from Ferrari that didn't go celebrate Carlos's win, and the difference you saw, like the pictures for and videos of when drivers won their first race, and just this overjoyed team of everybody like coming, and it was like 6 people there for him. No! Exactly. Like I'm anybody that didn't show up for when Carlos won, you're getting the rights and lefts.
There was a McLaren person on the pit wall on the start finish line cheering his old team.
Exactly.
Like so much more support. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a couple minutes to think about it, and I watched a couple days ago. I watched Danny Rick do a little training with GSP, and obviously I'm kind of into some of the UFC stuff. So I'd like to. Well, I think I want to drink a beer with Danny Rick when we're said and done. I'd like to get a little scrap with Danny Rick. I've seen him rear naked choke Landy before. I've never seen him put hooks in, but I'd like to give him a little tussle and see what he does.
For those of you who don't know, GSP is George St. Pierre, one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time. For me, people might not like this answer, but it's actually really easy for me. I'm going to go with Max versus Smack'em. There's just something about him. I obviously he's a phenomenal driver. Earlier on the podcast, I said he's the best driver currently in Formula One. I firmly believe that. But, they're all on summer break right now, and you look at their Instagrams. I swear he looks like he's in a wax museum. He doesn't look real to me, like in the pictures. He just looks fake. I don't know how to describe it. And so there's a part of me that just has this like visceral reaction where I just want to punch him in the face to see if he's real or if he's wax. So I'm going to go with Max on this one.
Something real fast that I found interesting. I feel like Max and Nelson Piquet's daughter, I do not know what her name is. I feel like they look very similar. And I also found another F1 couple a couple days ago. Landy and his girlfriend could be brother and sister from what it looks like. I don't know if y'all have seen that one or not yet. But I feel like Max and his and Nelson's daughter and Landy and his girlfriend, I feel like they could all be related.
I feel like we need like a breaking news tune, like dun 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 dun. Are we breaking news here? Like, what's happening? But yeah, so that's the beer or the beverage of your choice with the driver in the paddock, or anyone in the paddock for that matter. And then who would you punch in the paddock? So now I'm gonna change gears a little bit. We're gonna do a little bit of fact or fiction. And so for the first fact or fiction, I feel like I know where this one's gonna go. But fact or fiction, Mercedes will finish ahead of Ferrari by the end of the season. I'm going fact.
Fact.
Anyone disagree?
No.
I'm going fact as well. No team with that high of a DNF rate has ever finished in the top 2 of the constructors. So if they continue that up, I don't think there's any way that they can finish in the top 2. Mercedes will jump them at some point.
I think it's a complete gut punch, but I think it's a fact. Like it's such a wasted potential of a season, but it's a fact.
So here's my suggestion. Let's get rid of Mattia and let's bring in Gunter. And then maybe I feel like maybe Ferrari can get their strategy right, or something needs to change in Ferrari. It's like a bad dream happening over there this whole season.
Yeah, my biggest issue is when we all were watching the broadcast, at least in Hungary, and we talked about this on, I think, episode 2. They were telling us how bad the hard tires were for 20 minutes. And then Leclerc puts on hard tires. But then after, Matteo says that it was the right strategy call. And so I don't know if this just, as the principal of the team, that you've got to just, say what you think is going to motivate your crew or what have you. But it feels like it's just a bunch of bullshit. And is there going to be a come to what moment with Ferrari? Like, who fires him? Is he fireable? Like, is that even possible? Is he just going to say, you know what, I don't have it anymore and walk away? And this might shift us into a different area. But is he the actual problem?
No.
Yeah, I don't know if he is either. If he were, who's going to come in and say, you know what, we need a different voice.
I think the problem is the machine. The machine of Ferrari is so set in its way. Like Ferrari is a very, very great brand, world known. Like there's no question about it. But when it comes to Formula One, historically over the last 25 years, probably longer, that's all I kind of can go back. You can't go against the brand. If you say something that is going to put them in a bad light, you are dead to them. And it doesn't matter who you are, they've moved on from you and they will like railroad you. So I think the machine of Ferrari is the problem.
It's an interesting take that they're almost more willing to protect the brand of Ferrari in whatever way they think is necessary versus winning on the track.
100%.
Which is a little unfortunate, but that's a great point.
And I do agree with Austin, but at some point somebody will have to answer for what is going on, and whether it's this year or maybe next year, and he's the only one that can answer for it, essentially. Whether he's a scapegoat or not, I don't think you can have this type of year and they continue to, what would you say, Jordan? They haven't won a championship since 2007, 2008 when Kimi won. At some point changes will be made, and you go for the head of the snake, and he's essentially it, for what can be removed from the program.
He will be removed. It's just a matter of when. And if it continues down the trajectory that we're on currently, he will be gone maybe next season. But Ferrari replaced him. I cannot remember their old team principal's name for the life of me, but I want to say they replaced him with Mattia in 2007 or 2017. Sorry. So
19.
he hasn't even 19. So he hasn't been
pulled it up.
The team principal for all that. It's only been a handful of years. So he's been around in the Ferrari brand since the Schumacher days and probably before. But if they continue to mess up their strategy as bad as they have been, he will not make it another season.
Marzullo, I'm going to butcher his name. They're all Italian names. I can't even read English. So, Bene, what, I don't know.
Nailed it. It sounds exactly right.
It's spot on.
It's funny if you go back like 45 years. It's like they outside of two, they basically last like 3 years there.
And who's the one that lasted the longest during the Schumacher era? We all probably know it.
Jean Todt. Yeah, he was there for,
I don't know if I'm saying his name
14 years. But yeah, other than him and Marco Piccinini, that he was there for 10, it's basically 2-3 years in that seat, and he's at that 3-year mark.
Anyway, I think for that fact or fiction, we're all unanimous. Mercedes will finish ahead of Ferrari by the end of the year. Yes?
Yes.
And we'll stick with Ferrari for the next one. I feel like this is interesting. And you could look at it from sort of today or maybe the next 1 to 3 years. Fact or fiction, Carlos Sainz is better than Charles Leclerc. Who wants to take that one first? All right, well, Austin, we'll start with you. Fact or fiction?
Fiction. Carlos had an amazing win this year, and I do love that he got an amazing win. But if you look at all of his podiums in the past, they were all at the fault of someone else having a misfortune. His first podium was in Brazil when Lewis was demoted after colliding with Albon. The wreck in Monza that had Pierre win his first race. Again, you had a lot of front runners go out. He's been around, but he's never really put it together. I think this year was amazing that he did put it together, but fiction. He's a good middle of the pack driver and a great car right now.
Cole, what about you?
I'm going to say it's fiction as well. Carlos Sainz will never win a world championship. Charles Leclerc could. Carlos never will, though. No matter. He's spent time at multiple teams. So he's been at McLaren, he's been at Renault, he's been at Toro Rosso, and he's been at Ferrari. And he's never he's been in competitive cars, but he's never been able to put it together. And I'm not saying Charles is going to win a world championship. I'm saying he has a longer longevity and has more potential to win a world championship. So fiction.
I'm 3 for 3 on that. I think it's fiction as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go fiction too. Austin, to one of your comments about Carlos's performance, he has more podiums than Charles does this year. So, I don't know. I mean, look, I think Ferrari, their own issues aside, has a really strong driver pairing. Cole, to your point, they have the opportunity or the ability, the capability to win a drivers in a constructors championship. Will they? Probably not. But I think they've got a good enough driver pairing and right now a good enough car to be there. And unfortunately, they're not. So, yeah, I think we'll go for fiction on that one. For the last factor fiction, Landy gets his first win this season. Is that going to happen?
I'm going to say fiction. I'm going to say, I first and foremost, I love Lando Norris. I know we are big on Landy Norris, landynorris.com. I would say that Lando will get a win in McLaren, but it won't be this season. I think McLaren is on the proper trajectory for them to win races in the next couple years. I do believe Landy Norris will be a world champion with McLaren. I'm going to say that again. I genuinely believe in my heart that Lando Norris will be a world champion in McLaren while he is there.
I mean, I love that prediction. It's going to be good for landynorris.com. I would love to see it. I mean, I think, we talked about who would you want to have a beverage with in the paddock. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Lando Norris is a fan favorite and a great driver. I would love to see it. I think for the fact or fiction for me, I'm gonna go fact here. Is it going to be on pure ability or performance? Probably not. Could it have been Sochi last year where he should have gotten his first win and unfortunately stuck out a little too long on the slick tires in the rain? It might take a weekend like that to get him another opportunity. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen with Esteban in Hungary last year and Pierre Gasly and his win and crazy situations. So I'm going to roll the dice here and go fact. Maybe this is just me hoping it happens. But yeah, I'll say fact. Lando gets his first win this season.
I'll go
what
fiction.
About you?
Yeah,
fiction?
I'll go fiction. I think with that car, even though that they're on a good trajectory over the year, I don't think a lot would have to go right on a Sunday for them to pull it off. You probably have to have a couple of DNFs and whatever it may be, and also like we talked about earlier. Even though your teammate is your biggest rival, his teammate doesn't give his team the benefit of figuring things. His teammate's so bad that it doesn't help his team figure out strategy-wise throughout the race, because Danny Rick's typically just running his own race in 18th at this point, and it doesn't really matter what he's doing. I think he will win very soon, and I think he probably will win next year as long as they continue with the car, but I just don't think he's a good enough driver to win this year. It's just not a good enough car to pull it out.
Sten, what about you?
I think fiction, but kudos to McLaren for being pretty good in preseason testing, to being the absolute worst car in Bahrain and having all of their problems, to rebounding and making it to the point where we're talking about them at the summer break. Could they happen into a win? I don't think they can, but I'm glad that they're at least in that conversation now.
All right, so I'm the only one willing to make the jump there with Landy. So let's go Landy. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to bring them up. If you don't, we can wrap up with 2 trivia questions that I have for you guys. Cole, you got something first?
I do have. Here's a question for y'all. Aston Martin has brought an upgraded wing to Hungary with end plates on it, which were deemed illegal before with the new regulation. But they have figured out a wiggle room in the rule book to create end plates on their wing. Do multiple teams have a new wing with end plates in Belgium? They've had 3 weeks to develop. Do you think any other teams have brought a new spec wing?
I'm going to go no. I don't really have a real reason for no other than Aston's in 9th place. And why would you, what was it? Gunther said he's going to copy the best in Ferrari. So are you going to have a Red Bull or Mercedes or Ferrari copy an Aston Martin? I'm going to go no.
I think I agree with the last part of that Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes aren't going to copy it, but I think that someone else will, because taking a shot on, a $500,000, $250,000, whatever the budget would be to maybe luck into a massive benefit in the latter half of the year. I think every time any constructor sees a car come out with something different, they are already doing research on would it work for them. And I think that probably 2 or 3 teams will come out with an update in the next 2 races.
Yeah. Have we confirmed that it's legal?
We can confirm that it's not illegal. I can't confirm that it's fully legal yet. I'm sure that's actually out there, but I believe that I'm going to say that there is one of the 3 big teams of Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. I'm going to say one of those teams copies that wing before the end of the season. I think it will be a massive difference.
Did they interview, was it on Saturday or Sunday where they interviewed Horner and they asked him about it? Was it him that said that basically that as long as it's not illegal that they're going to take a look at it? I think it was him. They may not, like you said, does a Red Bull copy an 8th place team, but it would almost be interesting for does a Mercedes do it if it works to get that extra gear that they really need desperately,
But here's a thing, if it has been, at least from a article yesterday, it has been deemed legal, but similar to DAS, the dual axis steering that Mercedes came out with that pretty much let them, pull their steering wheel away from their axle to make the tires pivot in to get better temperature. It's going to be probably red lit for next year, because it while it is within regulations, it's a very clever interpretation that just slipped into the gap. So I don't know if it makes sense to put a lot of R&D into something that's going to be banned next year.
Another FIA ruling that is very gray and has gaps that can just be filled in.
So the original ruling last season in 2021 was a lot of the rear wings had end plates on them. So the very end had like a little, 4-inch part that stuck up that helped with the drag. So they outlawed that for 2022, but Aston Martin has figured out the loophole in the system to connect it as one piece as opposed to being a bolt-on side piece. So that's how it's passing inspection currently, is that it's drawn out as it's a solid piece. So I'll be curious to see who does copy it, because I think somebody will.
Yeah, it would be fascinating if all 10 teams showed up with it and they were like, kudos to Aston Martin for figuring out the way to give us more downforce or whatever it leads to. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. That's definitely one of the things we can keep an eye on as they come back in Spa. So for the last 2 trivia questions to wrap up tonight, first trivia question is, in Belgium, who will start their 100th Grand Prix in Formula One? Sten, you've got an answer.
George
Russell? No.
I'm going to go and take a guess, though I know it's actually right because I just looked it up. And it's your boy, Pedro Gasioso.
I was going to guess Pierre Gasly.
Yeah, it's my boy Pedro Gasioso is going to make his 100th career start in a Grand Prix in Belgium. Thought that was pretty cool.
Is he 4 years in F1 now? How many years is he in?
That would be 5 if they're 20 races a year, right?
He's 5 years in.
Yeah, 5th season. Yeah.
Let's get him in that Alpine. I've been tweeting about him, trying to get him. Like, we need him to he's going to Alpine. We need it to happen.
Yeah, we need him to like the post to confirm. A little inside info.
He did race 5 races in 2017.
Okay, so it's
6 years.
Yeah, 6th competitive season, 5th full season. And for the next and the last trivia question of the night, excluding Lawrence Strolovich, which F1 driver's father has the highest net worth?
It's got to be Max.
I don't think it's Max.
Really?
Not according to what I looked up. Yeah, not Max. Was it Jos Verstappen? Is that Max's dad?
Yas.
Yas. Okay. You'll be fascinated when you hear this, by the way.
Latifi.
Nicholas Latifi. Yeah. Nicholas Latifi's father, Michael, is worth $2.1 billion. He is the CEO of Sofina Foods, which is a huge Williams sponsor, so it makes sense. And I thought this was an interesting fact. Maybe we can dig into this later, but he has invested $200 million in the McLaren Group, which I thought was interesting. Now, that's all the details that I have on that, but I thought that was fascinating.
So you're saying Latifi to McLaren? Is that what you're saying?
No, but I think the point here is if you look at people like Lance Stroll and Nicholas Latifi and Nikita Mazepin, if you've got a rich daddy, that might be a path to an F1 seat. So performance be damned with Nicholas Latifi. He's got an incredibly wealthy father and an incredibly wealthy father who sponsors the team. So that might keep him in that seat a little bit longer than maybe we all expect.
Here's a trivia question for you. How much money does it take to go from a child karting to potentially securing a Formula One seat?
2.1 billion?
2 million.
Rich people money.
So depending on how long they spend in their junior career and if they idle in Formula 3 or Formula 2, it can vary slightly, but it's $6 to $12 million from karting to getting to the point where you could become a reserve or a Formula One driver.
Yeah, but are you suggesting that all of these drivers' families have invested 6 to 12 million, or someone invested that money in them in order to get to that point, and now maybe they have a backer or a financial partner or things like that? But yeah, that's a crazy number.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a 6-year-old son. He likes driving. We started doing some digging, and like karting alone in America is probably not likely, but in Europe it's a lot more common. But karting alone is like $40K a year, just vehicle maintenance, entry fees, travel, all of the stuff. I mean, if you do karting for 6 years, 7 years, like it starts adding up, and then you're having to find the sponsors to help fund your seat to get into the bigger, monocoques.
Sim racing is my little rig in front of me, significantly cheaper. Not the same thrill, but I mean, you could just get into a little esports here at this current day and save yourself a couple $1 million.
Yeah, I think F1 2022 and the esports path might be the path of lesser resistance, I guess, and not going to cost you 2.1 billion like Michael Latifi can fund. So, yeah, that was the fact or fiction, the fireside chat, the trivia questions. Any last parting words from the crew tonight?
We got a few weeks until we find out really what happens with this Oski P situation, because these guys can't talk work, can't talk shop, can't do anything for a few weeks. So we're really just kind of waiting to find out what happens for like 13 days.
Yeah, so I will say this. Unless one or all of us win the Mega Millions, we will not be getting our kids and off to the go-kart track. So we will be here next week with a new episode. We can guarantee you that. We might take a little bit of a deep dive into the data for next week and really break down how the new regulations are doing. Is it working? Is it improving the way that they intended and hoped to prove? So barring a miraculous winning of any lottery winnings, we'll be here with you next week. We thank you for tuning in. Feel free to check out all of our episodes up to this point. Check us out on social media at Slipstream F1 Podcast. And thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.